A
Come on, man,
tourist
give me
threw
some
coffee at a
motion.
royal
You're
guard
supposed to
and thought it was
react.
just a prank.
I'm the
But he
social
didn't
media
expect
king. I
this.
need content
The
here.
streets near the Grand Palace were buzzing with activity. Families wandered around, snapping photos of the ornate gates, street performers entertained with music and juggling acts, and vendors sold snacks and souvenirs to passers-by. The air carried the mingling scents of fresh flowers from the palace gardens, roasted chestnuts from a nearby stall, and the faint aroma of coffee drifting from a cafe that overlooked the main square. Among the crowd was a young tourist named Alex. He was in his mid-20s, tall and casually dressed in a bright t-shirt, shorts, and sneakers. His backpack, slightly worn from months of travel, swung loosely over one shoulder. Alex was the type of person who loved adventure, loved fun, and loved capturing every moment on his phone. He had been traveling across Europe for several weeks, ticking off famous landmarks from his bucket list, and today the palace was his main destination. From the moment Alex stepped onto the cobbled square in front of the palace gates, he was mesmerized. The building was larger than he had imagined, its stone walls carved with intricate details that told stories from hundreds of years ago. Towering spires reached into the sky, and the guards standing at attention added a sense of solemnity to the scene. Alex had seen plenty of royal guards in pictures and videos, but seeing them in real life was different. They stood perfectly still, their uniforms immaculate, faces completely expressionless, and eyes focused straight ahead. They were statuesque, almost like they belonged more to history than the present day. Despite their stern demeanor, Alex's playful side was already forming a plan. He had seen countless videos online where tourists had pranked royal guards, doing silly things that made viewers laugh around the world. Most of these videos showed guards remaining completely unmoved, their calm composure making the prank even funnier. Just a harmless prank, he thought to himself, grinning. They won't care, it'll be hilarious. Alex had a coffee cup in his hand, a large, disposable cup with a lid that had a small opening for sipping. The warm beverage inside had been his companion through the morning as he explored the city's cafes. Now, it seemed like the perfect prop for his little stunt. He walked slowly around the guard, observing him, pretending to look at the palace gates. His steps were careful, making sure no security cameras were pointing directly at him, and yet not so obvious that people would notice his mischievous intentions. He felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Part of him knew this was a little risky, but the thought of capturing a funny moment on video made the adrenaline rush worth it. Alex whispered to himself, "Just a tiny splash, nothing big. No one will get hurt, it's just a joke." The guard remained completely still, the stiff posture and disciplined stance almost hypnotic. Tourists around them clicked their cameras and posed for selfies, while street performers added to the lively atmosphere. Alex waited for the perfect moment, eyeing the guard from behind a cluster of tourists. He could almost hear the drumbeat of his own heart, quickening with anticipation. And then, with a flick of his wrist, Alex aimed the coffee cup toward the unsuspecting guard. The liquid arced through the air, a small stream splashing against the front of the guard's uniform. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow. The liquid glistened in the sunlight, and Alex felt a thrill run through him. To Alex's surprise, the guard didn't flinch. His expression remained completely unchanged, his posture unbroken. It was exactly like the videos he had seen, stiff, serious, and absolutely immovable. Alex couldn't help but laugh a little too loudly. "Yes, this is perfect," he whispered to himself. Other tourists nearby looked startled, some murmuring in confusion, while others giggled at Alex's obvious excitement. Thinking the moment was harmless, Alex raised his phone and began recording, wanting to capture the guard's stoic reaction for his social media. He was already imagining the comments he would receive, the laughs and the likes piling up. In his mind, this would be remembered as a clever, funny little prank he had pulled off while traveling, a story he could tell friends back home. The crowd around them started to notice. Some parents quickly moved their children a few steps back, sensing something unusual. A few security personnel stationed near the entrance glanced at Alex, their expressions unreadable but alert. Alex, however, was too caught up in the excitement to notice the subtle warning signs. He felt invincible, as though the cheerful energy of the square had given him temporary courage. "What's the worst that could happen?" he muttered under his breath. "It's just a joke. No one's getting hurt, right?" He did not expect that the seemingly silent guard had already taken note of him. Although the guard's face did not move, his sharp eyes followed Alex's every step. Behind that calm exterior was a trained awareness that missed nothing. The guard's posture did not change, but his senses were alert. Any movement that could threaten the order of the palace grounds was instantly noticed. Meanwhile, Alex, still laughing quietly to himself, began walking away from the scene, thinking the prank was over. But then a firm hand gently tapped his shoulder. Alex froze. The laughter drained from his face, replaced by a sudden realization that maybe, just maybe, this prank was not as harmless as he thought. Turning around, he saw a uniformed officer standing behind him. The officer did not smile or laugh. His expression was serious, professional, and entirely without amusement. Alex's heart sank. Hi," he stammered, unsure of what to say. He felt a wave of panic rising, a sensation he had never experienced during his travels. The prank, which had seemed so innocent moments ago, now felt like a mistake he could not easily undo. The officer spoke in a calm but firm tone, explaining that throwing liquid at a royal guard was considered a serious offense.
I'm literally the social
Alex's
media
mind
king,
raced.
recognized everywhere.
He had thought
You
of it
must
as
have
a funny
recognized me.
joke, a momentary lapse
Are you
of judgment,
sure you shouldn't
but
salute
now
me?
he realized it had real-world consequences. Other tourists began to gather around, curious and whispering. Cameras clicked, not for Alex's amusement this time, but because the scene had turned tense. Alex felt a mix of embarrassment, fear, and disbelief. How could something that felt so small and funny escalate so quickly? He tried to explain. I didn't mean any harm, it was just a joke." The officer remained silent, listening but showing no sign of leniency. Alex's mind spun, trying to find a way to fix the situation, to make it disappear like a bad dream. As Alex was guided toward the security office, the bustling energy of the square seemed to fade behind him. The laughter and chatter of tourists were replaced by the weight of his actions. In that moment, he realized that being in a foreign country meant respecting local rules and customs, even if they seemed strict or different from what he was used to. He had crossed a line, and now he had to face the consequences. Along the way, Alex caught glimpses of the guard, still standing perfectly still calm, still unwavering. It was as if the guard was silently reminding Alex that some things, like respect and discipline, were not meant to be joked about. Alex felt a pang of regret, wishing he could turn back time, remove the cup of coffee from his hand, and simply smile politely at the guard instead. By the time Alex reached the security office, he had gone from playful mischief to a full understanding of responsibility. He sat down on a chair, nervously tapping his fingers, while officers documented the incident. Cameras recorded every word, every gesture, and Alex realized that in the age of smartphones, nothing ever truly disappears. His prank, once meant to be a fleeting laugh, was now captured and preserved in a way that he could not control. As he waited, Alex reflected on his journey so far. He had traveled to see beautiful places, meet interesting people, and create memories. And yet this memory, this mistake, was already teaching him a lesson he would never forget. The importance of thinking before acting, of understanding the world he was visiting, and of respecting the traditions and rules of other cultures. The sun continued to shine outside, casting long shadows over the palace square. Tourists still wandered and laughed, unaware of the drama that had just unfolded. Street performers played music, and vendors called out their cheerful offers of food and souvenirs. But for Alex, the lively world outside felt distant, almost surreal. He had crossed an invisible boundary, and now he was learning that every action, no matter how small it seemed, could have consequences far greater than anticipated. Hours later, when Alex would finally leave the security office, he would carry with him more than embarrassment. He would carry the realization that respect and awareness mattered as much as adventure and fun. And though the story was only beginning, that sunny afternoon in front of the palace would be etched in his memory forever. A reminder that what might feel like a harmless prank can sometimes turn into a moment of life-changing learning. Alex sat in the small, brightly lit security office, feeling the weight of what he had done settle heavily on his shoulders. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and paper, a stark contrast to the bustling palace square he had just left. Officers moved quietly around him, typing notes, reviewing surveillance footage, and speaking in calm, serious tones. It was all so official, so real. The excitement of the prank had completely disappeared, replaced by a gnawing sense of regret and panic. At first, Alex tried to smile nervously, hoping that somehow charm or humor could fix the situation. "It was just a joke," he muttered to himself, almost like a mantra. But the more he said it, the less convincing it sounded even to him. The officer who had escorted him in, a tall woman with a firm but composed expression, watched him carefully. She was polite but unyielding, and her eyes seemed to see right through him. "Sir," she began in a calm voice, "throwing liquid on a royal guard is considered a serious offense. Do you understand what you have done?" Alex swallowed hard. I didn't think it would matter. I didn't think anyone would care. It was just I thought it was funny." His words came out rushed, as if speaking faster might erase the incident entirely. The officer shook her head slightly. "You are in a foreign country, and our laws and customs must be respected. What you thought was harmless is actually taken very seriously here. This is not just about a joke. It is about respect, security, and public safety." Alex felt the color drain from his face. He had traveled to many countries, experienced countless new things, and thought he was prepared for adventure. But now, in this room, he felt small, inexperienced, and foolish. He had never imagined that a simple prank could put him in such a serious situation. Meanwhile, the officer gestured to another part of the room, where a monitor displayed surveillance footage from the palace square. Alex saw himself in the recording, clearly visible, coffee in hand, laughing as he threw the liquid. The camera had captured everything in perfect clarity, from the angle of his arm to the splash of coffee against the guard's uniform. His heart sank as he realized there was no way to deny what had happened. "You see this footage," the officer continued. "Every movement is recorded. This is evidence of your actions. Do you understand?" Alex nodded slowly, unable to find words. The laughter and excitement he had felt moments ago were now replaced with a deep, gnawing anxiety. He could feel the eyes of the officers on him, and even without speaking, their disappointment was clear. Hours passed. Alex remained in the small chair, shifting uncomfortably, occasionally glancing at the clock on the wall. The palace square outside seemed far away now, almost like a dream. The sounds of tourists laughing and street
So you're the
performers
social
playing
media
music were
king,
muffled
eh?
by the thick
Quite the
walls of
title
the
to wear
security
right here.
office.
Well,
Time
general, I
dragged,
suppose.
and Alex
It
felt like
certainly
every
draws
second
attention.
stretched endlessly. During this time, other officers came in to ask questions. They were professional and polite, but their questions were direct and thorough. "What made you decide to throw the coffee? Did you know this could be considered assault? Have you traveled to other countries with strict rules before?" Alex answered honestly, his voice low and hesitant. He explained that he had seen online videos and thought it would be funny, that he had not intended any harm, and that he now realized how serious his mistake was. The officers listened, sometimes nodding slightly, sometimes making notes silently. There was no shouting, no anger, just calm, deliberate attention to detail. It made Alex feel small, like a schoolboy being gently scolded for a major mistake. But it was more than just embarrassment. There was a clear understanding that the law and local customs were not to be taken lightly. As he waited, Alex reflected on the moment before the prank. How casual he had been, how little he had considered the consequences, and how completely unaware he had been of the discipline and training of the royal guards. The guards were not simply people in fancy uniforms. They were highly trained, professional individuals tasked with upholding centuries of tradition and security. Alex realized he had underestimated them entirely. While he sat there thinking, a few other tourists arrived at the security office, not to interfere, but out of curiosity. Word of the incident had spread quickly through the palace grounds, and some visitors had followed the trail of whispers and cameras to see what had happened. Alex felt a mixture of shame and embarrassment, knowing that they were all watching him. He tried to shrink in his chair, wishing he could disappear. One officer handed him a glass of water, and Alex took it gratefully. He realized that the physical discomfort, dry throat, fast heartbeat, sweaty palms, was only part of the experience. The mental and emotional weight of realizing how badly he had misjudged the situation was even heavier. Every small movement, every thought, was a reminder of the prank he had thought would be funny, but was now a serious mistake. After what felt like an eternity, a senior officer entered the room. He was older, with a calm presence that commanded attention without force. He looked at Alex carefully, studying his expression. "Mr. Alex," he began, "we understand that you did not intend harm, but you must understand that intention is not enough. Actions have consequences, especially here. The palace is a place of history, tradition, and security. A single action, even when you thought was funny, can disrupt that. Alex nodded, swallowing hard. He could barely speak. The words "I'm sorry" repeated in his mind like a constant echo. He wished he could explain that he had been foolish, naive, and impulsive. But he knew that words alone could not erase what had happened. The senior officer continued. Because this is your first offense, and because you have cooperated fully, we will not pursue severe legal action. However, you will face consequences. You will be required to issue a formal apology, pay a fine, and attend a short educational session about local laws and customs. This is to ensure that you understand the gravity of your actions and do not repeat them in the future. Relief and anxiety washed over Alex simultaneously. He was relieved that the situation would not result in imprisonment or deportation, but he felt anxious about the public embarrassment and the fine he would have to pay. More than anything, he felt a deep sense of personal failure. He had underestimated the seriousness of the culture and law in the country he was visiting. As the officers prepared the documents, Alex had time to think more deeply. He remembered the look on the guard's face, or rather, the lack of a look. That calm, unwavering presence was a silent lesson in discipline and professionalism. He realized that the guard had handled the situation perfectly, maintaining composure and following protocol while Alex had acted impulsively. The senior officer handed Alex a form and a pen. "Sign here to acknowledge your understanding of the incident and the consequences," he said. Alex took the pen with trembling hands, carefully reading the words. Signing it felt like a small but important step toward taking responsibility for his actions. As he signed, Alex thought about how quickly things could spiral out of control in a foreign country. A prank that might seem harmless in one place could be a serious offense in another. He realized that travel was not just about sightseeing and fun. It was about awareness, respect, and learning to navigate a world with rules that might be very different from what he was used to. Once the documents were signed, an officer explained the next steps. Alex would pay a fine at the palace administration office and attend a short briefing about cultural norms and laws for visitors. He was also advised to be cautious in his interactions with others, understanding that his actions could have unintended consequences. Finally, after what felt like hours, Alex was allowed to leave the security office. The sunlight outside felt blinding after the fluorescent lighting, and the palace square seemed both familiar and distant. Tourists were still laughing, taking photos and enjoying the day, but for Alex, everything had changed. He walked slowly, reflecting on the incident, replaying the events in his mind, and realizing the depth of his mistake. For the first time in his travels, Alex felt a true sense of humility. He had been careless, overconfident, and unaware of the boundaries that existed in a country not his own. He had learned in the most direct way possible that actions, even small ones, carry responsibility. And he knew that he would carry this lesson with him for the rest of his journey, and indeed for the rest of his life. As he reached the edge of the palace square, Alex caught a final glimpse of the guard. The officer stood perfectly still, eyes forward, expression unreadable. It was a silent reminder that some rules, some traditions, and some duties were beyond the understanding of a playful tourist. Alex felt a deep respect for the discipline and dedication he had witnessed, and he silently vowed never to underestimate such things again. That afternoon, as he left the palace grounds and headed toward a nearby cafe to collect himself, Alex realized that his adventure had unexpectedly turned into a lesson in maturity, respect, and cultural awareness. He had come seeking fun and excitement, but had been given something far more valuable, a reminder that every action has consequences, and that respect is a universal language that transcends borders, uniforms, and even playful intentions. And though the embarrassment would linger, and though the story of his prank would likely be retold in laughter by others, Alex understood that the experience had changed him. It had taught him a lesson he could not forget, one that would guide him in every step of his travels from that day forward. The next morning, Alex woke up in his small hotel room feeling both anxious and restless. The events of the previous day kept replaying in his mind, the coffee splashing, the guard standing motionless, the long hours in the security office. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the wall, trying to process everything. The room felt unusually quiet compared to the busy palace square, But that quiet only gave his thoughts room to spin faster. After a moment, he realized he could no longer ignore the practical matters at hand. He had to pay the fine, attend the briefing about local laws and customs, and face the lingering embarrassment of the incident. As he packed a small bag for the day, Alex's nerves were accompanied by a sense of curiosity. Part of him wondered how the day would unfold. What would the palace officials say? Would people still talk about him? Would he be able to explain himself clearly? By the time he stepped out onto the streets, the city was alive with movement. Morning traffic hummed along the roads, cafes were filling with locals and tourists sipping coffee, and the square outside the palace looked just as it had before, with tourists taking photos and guards standing at attention. But Alex noticed something he hadn't seen yesterday, the curious glances. People whispered, pointed subtly, and occasionally took out their phones. It seemed that word of the incident had spread quickly. He felt a jolt of embarrassment. As he approached the palace administration office, a security officer nodded toward him, recognizing him immediately. The building was grand, made of stone with tall arched windows, and it carried a quiet air of authority. Inside, he was directed to a waiting area where other visitors, officials, and staff moved about in quiet efficiency. Alex took a seat, feeling small among the serious faces and polished surroundings. The officer who had escorted him yesterday appeared, this time with a tablet in hand. "Alex, we are ready to proceed," she said in a calm but firm voice. "First, we will review the incident and its consequences, and then you will pay the fine and attend the briefing." Alex nodded silently, feeling the weight of responsibility more than ever. He knew that the morning would not be quick or easy, but he was determined to cooperate fully. As he followed the officer down a long hallway, he noticed portraits of past monarchs and historical events lining the walls. Their stern faces seemed to remind visitors of the history and importance of the palace, and Alex couldn't help but feel that he was walking through a space far more significant than just a tourist attraction. In a small, official-looking room, Alex was asked to sit in front of a desk while the officer reviewed the surveillance footage from the previous day. Once again, he saw himself throwing the coffee at the guard. This time, however, the footage seemed different. It wasn't funny or playful. It looked reckless, impulsive, and disrespectful. The clear image of the guard standing still, unaffected, made Alex feel a deep sense of shame. The playful bravado he had felt yesterday had vanished entirely. "You see, Alex," the officer said, pointing at the screen, "actions like this can be seen as a form of disrespect and can escalate in ways you might not anticipate. A tourist might think it is harmless, but in reality it can cause serious consequences." Alex nodded, swallowing hard. "I understand," he said quietly, wishing he could rewind time. He realized now that the guard was not just a passive participant in the prank, but a representative of centuries of tradition and discipline. Every action he took had weight and significance. Next, the officer explained the fine. It was not overly large, but it was enough to make Alex pause. Paying it would be a tangible acknowledgement of his mistake. He reached for his wallet, hands slightly trembling, and handed over the payment. The officer recorded it efficiently, issuing a receipt and making notes. The physical act of paying the fine made the situation feel real, undeniable, and permanent. Once the fine was settled, Alex was escorted to a small classroom-like space where a short briefing about local laws and cultural norms would be conducted. A group of officials, some speaking directly to tourists and others observing quietly, welcomed him. Alex took a seat among a handful of other visitors, some of whom were listening intently while others seemed more relaxed. The briefing began with a clear explanation of the country's expectations for visitors. Officials spoke about the importance of respecting historical sites, public officials, and ceremonial practices. They highlighted how actions that might seem trivial, like jokes, pranks, or disrespectful gestures, could have serious consequences. Alex listened carefully, realizing that what he had thought was playful had crossed a line he had not understood. As the session continued, officers shared real-life examples of incidents where tourists had misunderstood cultural rules, ranging from minor fines to more severe consequences. Each story reinforced the lesson. Being in a foreign country required awareness, respect, and responsibility. Alex felt his stomach tighten with every example, imagining how easily he could have made a worse mistake than the coffee prank. One officer paused and looked directly at Alex. "Mr. Alex," she said kindly but firmly, "it is clear you did not intend harm, but you must always remember that your actions have consequences. This briefing is not meant to shame you, but to ensure you leave with understanding and respect for our laws and culture." Alex nodded, feeling a mix of gratitude and embarrassment. He realized that the incident had become more than a personal mistake. It was a lesson in cultural sensitivity and the importance of considering others. He thought about how lucky he was that the situation had been handled with professionalism and patience rather than anger or hostility. After the briefing concluded, Alex was given a certificate acknowledging his completion of the educational session. It was a small piece of paper, but to him it felt significant, a tangible reminder of the day's lessons and his personal growth. He held it carefully, almost reverently, and promised himself he would keep the memory of this day alive as a lesson in humility and responsibility. Stepping back outside into the palace square, Alex felt the weight of the public's gaze more acutely. Tourists and locals alike seemed more aware, some casting curious glances, others whispering quietly. He could feel the eyes of the city on him, and it made him walk with more caution and awareness. For the first time, he truly understood how behavior in public spaces could affect others and how cultural norms could influence even small interactions. As he wandered slowly through the square, he noticed the guard again, standing perfectly still as if nothing had happened. Alex paused for a moment, watching the guard's disciplined posture and unwavering focus. A wave of respect washed over him. The guard's calmness, his ability to maintain professionalism in the face of unexpected events, was a lesson in composure and duty. Alex realized that while he had thought the guard's stillness was humorous, it was in fact a demonstration of patience, discipline, and responsibility. Alex reflected on how quickly a playful moment could turn serious. He thought about the people in the office, the briefing session, and the officers who had patiently explained the rules. He realized that in many ways, the incident had been a fortunate one. He had received guidance, education, and an opportunity to learn without facing harsher consequences. Feeling a mix of relief and humility, Alex decided to take a walk through the nearby streets to clear his mind. Cafes and small shops lined the roads, their vibrant colors and inviting aromas contrasting with the heaviness he felt inside. As he walked, he thought about how he would tell this story to friends and family back home. He knew it would be humorous in retrospect, but he also knew it carried a serious lesson about respect, awareness, and cultural sensitivity. As the day progressed, Alex visited quieter parts of the city, away from the palace, reflecting on his journey and the lessons he had learned. He began to notice the little things, the way locals interacted, the care they took in maintaining public spaces, the patience in everyday interactions. Everything seemed more meaningful now. His experiences had shifted from simply sightseeing to understanding the world around him more deeply. Even in the evening, as the sun dipped toward the horizon and the streets were bathed in golden light, Alex could not shake the memory of the previous day's events. He thought about the viral videos he had watched online, the thrill of pranks, and the laughter he had imagined. Now he understood that the reality was far more complex. Humor and mischief had their place, but respect and awareness were essential, especially in places steeped in history and tradition. By the time he returned to his hotel, Alex felt a quiet sense of transformation. The incident had been embarrassing, stressful, and unexpected, but it had also been a profound learning experience. He realized that travel was not just about collecting memories and photos, but also about understanding, respecting, and growing as a person. That night, as he lay in bed, Alex reflected on the lessons of responsibility, cultural awareness, and humility. He knew that he would never forget the experience and that it would guide his actions in every future adventure. The day had been challenging, uncomfortable, and filled with moments of fear and reflection, but it had also been invaluable. And though the story of the coffee prank would likely follow him in conversations and social media shares, Alex understood that the true lesson lay not in embarrassment or ridicule, but in personal growth, respect, and the understanding that some actions, no matter how small they seem, carry weight and consequences far beyond what one might imagine. The next morning, Alex awoke with a mixture of relief and lingering anxiety. The events of the past 2 days weighed heavily on him, but he also felt a new sense of awareness and understanding. He had faced consequences, learned lessons, and seen firsthand how his actions could impact others. But he still had a journey ahead, both in his travels and in fully processing what had happened. After a quick breakfast at a nearby cafe, Alex decided to revisit the palace grounds, not to repeat any pranks, of course, but to observe and reflect. The square was alive once again with tourists, street performers, and vendors. The sun glinted off the cobblestones, casting long shadows from the ornate gates and the guards standing at attention. Alex walked slowly, deliberately noticing details he had overlooked before. The meticulous uniform of the guards, the polished boots, the carefully synchronized movements, and the precise timing of the ceremonial routines. He had been so caught up in the idea of fun that he had missed the beauty and discipline inherent in it all. As he passed one of the main gates, he noticed the same guard he had targeted with the coffee. The officer stood perfectly still, facing forward, expression unreadable. Alex felt a wave of respect and a tinge of guilt. He paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. In that moment, he silently acknowledged the guard's patience and professionalism, understanding that the situation could have escalated much more severely if discipline had faltered. Alex spent the morning walking around the palace gardens. The space was filled with fragrant flowers, neatly trimmed hedges, and ornate statues. Birds chirped in the trees, and the sound of water from fountains added a serene rhythm to the air. He reflected on the past days, thinking about how quickly a moment of carelessness could turn serious, and how his own impulsive behavior had taught him a lasting lesson. Every step he took through the gardens reminded him that his actions, even seemingly small ones, could have a larger impact than he imagined. Later, Alex decided to write down his experience in a small travel journal he carried with him. He recounted the prank, the immediate consequences, the long hours in the security office, the fine, and the educational session he had attended. Writing the story helped him process it more fully. He realized that while he had initially seen the incident as embarrassing, it had actually been a profound opportunity for growth. The embarrassment, he thought, was temporary, but the lessons were permanent. As he wrote, he considered the role of social media and online culture in shaping his behavior. The prank he had attempted was inspired by viral videos that made similar actions look harmless and funny. He reflected on how online trends could sometimes mislead people into underestimating real-world consequences. Alex realized that while it was natural to seek fun and share experiences online, it was equally important to understand boundaries, respect local customs, and act responsibly. In the afternoon, Alex visited a quiet part of the city, away from the main tourist areas. He walked along cobblestone streets lined with small shops, bakeries, and cafes. He paused to admire handmade crafts and local artwork, interacting politely with shopkeepers. For the first time in his trip, Alex felt a deeper connection with the places he visited, a connection based on understanding and respect rather than simple sightseeing. The embarrassment of his mistake still lingered, but it was now accompanied by a sense of humility and purpose. As the day turned to evening, Alex returned to his hotel room and reviewed the photographs he had taken during his travels. Unlike before, when he focused on selfies and staged shots, he now appreciated candid moments, architectural details, and natural beauty. He noticed how his perspective had shifted, from seeing the world as a playground for fun and amusement to recognizing it as a space filled with history, culture, and responsibility. That evening, Alex reflected on the social aspects of the incident. He realized that his prank had been witnessed by dozens of people, including fellow tourists, street performers, and local staff. The embarrassment he had felt was amplified by the public nature of the act, but it also underscored an important truth. Actions are rarely private, especially in public spaces. He thought about how easily misunderstandings could occur and how important it was to act thoughtfully, even in seemingly casual moments. Alex also considered the broader lesson of accountability. Facing consequences, he realized, was not something to fear but something to learn from. The fine he had paid, the educational briefing he had attended, and the time spent in the security office were all part of a structured system designed to teach responsibility. In a way, he was grateful for the opportunity to experience these lessons firsthand. They were far more impactful than abstract advice or warnings could ever be. The next morning, Alex made a small but meaningful decision. Before leaving the city for his next destination, he returned once more to the palace grounds, this time carrying a small notebook. He approached the area where the guards stood and wrote a note expressing his apology and respect. Though he could not hand it directly to the guard, the act was symbolic, a personal acknowledgement of the mistake and a promise to act with greater mindfulness in the future. It was a quiet, reflective moment, but to Alex, it felt deeply significant. After leaving the palace, Alex explored the surrounding neighborhood, immersing himself in the daily lives of locals. He observed the way children played in the streets, neighbors greeted one another, and vendors conducted business with patience and courtesy. Each observation reinforced the lessons he had learned. Respect, awareness, and consideration were vital not only in grand, ceremonial spaces, but also in everyday life. During his travels over the next few days, Alex noticed a subtle but meaningful change in himself. He was more observant, more thoughtful, and more patient. He approached interactions with locals with respect, paused before acting impulsively, and considered the potential impact of his decisions. Even when situations arose that could have been humorous or attention-grabbing, he chose discretion, understanding that sometimes restraint was the wisest course of action. One afternoon, while sitting in a quiet cafe, Alex reflected on the incident as a story rather than just a personal mistake. He realized that it had transformed from an embarrassing episode into a narrative of growth, cultural understanding, and self-awareness. He imagined sharing the story with friends, not as a tale of foolishness, but as a lesson in responsibility and humility. The humor that remained was gentle and reflective, no longer reckless or provocative. Alex also thought about the guard, who had remained a silent but powerful teacher in this experience. The officer's composure, patience, and professionalism had left a lasting impression. He realized that the guard's reaction, or lack of reaction, was not indifference but mastery, a demonstration of discipline and dedication. Alex admired the ability to remain calm, focused, and unwavering, even in the face of unexpected challenges. Over time, Alex found that the incident had changed the way he traveled and experienced the world. He approached landmarks with curiosity and reverence, observed cultural norms with care, and interacted with locals with genuine respect. He became more mindful of his surroundings and more aware of the consequences of his actions. Travel was no longer just about excitement or social media fame. It was about learning, understanding, and growing as a person. By the end of his trip, Alex had transformed in ways he had never anticipated. The coffee prank, once a moment of foolish amusement, had become a catalyst for reflection, growth, and change. He had learned lessons that went beyond rules and fines: humility, awareness, respect, and the understanding that actions, even small ones, carry weight. As he boarded the train to his next destination, Alex looked out the window at the passing cityscape. The grand palace, the bustling square, and the guards standing at attention all seemed smaller from a distance, yet the lessons he had learned felt larger than life. He smiled quietly to himself, knowing that the embarrassment he had endured had been transformed into wisdom, and that he would carry these lessons with him wherever he traveled. Later, Alex shared his experience online, not to seek laughs, but to tell a story of growth and understanding. He described the prank, the immediate consequences, the lessons learned, and the profound respect he now held for local customs and traditions. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Readers appreciated the honesty, the reflection, and the insight into cultural awareness. Alex realized that the story, once a source of embarrassment, could now inspire others to think before acting and to respect the cultures and rules of the places they visited. Even weeks after the incident, Alex found himself reflecting on the experience. He remembered the feeling of nervousness in the security office, the patience of the officers, the stillness of the guard, and the quiet lessons of responsibility. He realized that these memories, while initially uncomfortable, had become some of the most valuable of his travels. They reminded him that true growth often comes from mistakes, humility, and careful reflection. By the time Alex returned home, he was a changed traveler. He approached new cities with mindfulness, listened more attentively to local advice, and carefully considered the potential consequences of his actions. He traveled not only to see the world, but also to learn from it, to grow as a person. and to understand that respect and awareness are as important as curiosity and adventure. In the end, the coffee prank that had seemed so trivial had become a defining moment in Alex's journey. It taught him that humor must be balanced with respect, that freedom of action comes with responsibility, and that personal growth often comes from the most unexpected experiences. He carried the lessons with him, sharing them with friends, family, and fellow travelers, ensuring that the story would serve as both a cautionary tale and a source of insight. Alex's adventure had started with excitement and a playful spirit, but it ended with wisdom, humility, and a deep appreciation for the importance of respect and responsibility. He knew that he would never forget the lessons he had learned, and that they would continue to guide him in every corner of the world he explored. The incident with the royal guard was no longer just a story of embarrassment. It was a story of transformation, a story that would remain with him forever.